I actually got everything I wanted. My company's valued at 7 figures. I make 7 figures at 22. And I got to that point where everybody told me, like, when you get there, it's going to be sick. And I got there and I'm like, that's it. So ever since then, I chose not to be happy. And it's been the best decision I ever made. Like, think about it. Like, what are emotions? We feel these signals that happen in our brain, and people want to maximize those emotions and assume that if all the neurons at the same time are firing, that means you're happy. I just feel like people live on the 50% level all the time, and they get super high highs when they go partying and when the girl says yes, and then get super low lows when they break up and they're just super sad and depressed. They go on a wavelength. I didn't like that, because it got me like way too hungry for the highs. And then when I was in the lows, I was like, man, this sucks, right? And I looked at something called controlling the wavelength. Don't live at 50% and go 100 and 0. Instead, live at 75% and then kind of go like this. Don't fluctuate too much. To me, that's actually sick. Like, I don't get super high highs, but I never get super low lows. But overall, if you see it over a long enough period of time, I'm happier than other people because I just don't fluctuate that much. I'm more stable. And that allows me to make better decisions. Like, people want to get everything at the same time. So they're going on a party. They want to record it so they get the Instagram dopamine. They want to get drunk as fuck so they just get like the alcohol. They also want to do drugs at the same time. Then it's like everything's firing at the same time. And they go like, man, last night was a movie. I'm like, yeah, well, you didn't even experience it. Last night was a movie for you. All my life is a movie. And you're like, man, it's all about the memories. I have memories every day. Like, you don't need the big things to really be happy. When you live at 50 and just go like this, it's not nearly as good as when you live in 75 and then you kind of go like this. So how do you do this? You control your stimulus, because there's happiness, right? And there's you. This is you and this is happiness. You could go towards happiness, which is what most people do, or you could let happiness come to you. And the really way to achieve this is to set lower expectations. Like, let's say you're on a flight, right? The flight's gonna be 2 hours. But if in your mind you're like, you know what, screw it. The flight's gonna take 12 hours. Then by the time you get there, you're gonna be super happy because it didn't take 12 hours, it took 2. If you manage your expectations, then everything is a bonus. Everything is a gift, and you're happier because of it. You don't hate waiting. You just hate waiting more than you were told to wait. When you control your stimulus and you don't get bombarded with dopamine every single day, eventually the little things start to make more sense to you. They become more meaningful. You're happier with it. For example, I have my screen in black and white. Have you ever watched YouTube in black and white? Like, it's actually kind of boring. But I see things cooler. Like, I go out and like there's so much sun and everything's pretty, everything's super cool. When I work, I don't listen to music. Or if I listen to music, it has no lyrics. So when I hear a pumped up song, maybe at the gym, I get super pumped. Because I didn't have that stimulation before. The thing is, you don't need to chase happiness. You need to lower your standards of what makes you happy, and then eventually happiness will come to you. So here's a few tips you can do that. Screen in black and white. Super useful. Music with lyrics, that's fine, but lyrics usually program you, so I like to listen to music without. Just accept that most of your days are gonna be uneventful, unexceptional, completely boring, and that's fine, because eventually you're gonna start liking it. Huge stimulants like caffeine, nicotine, like, don't get me wrong, they're good for performance, but try to cut back a little bit of those, and then you won't become dependent of them, because you're a slave to everything you can't say no to. This is probably not that good of an advice. Take this with a grain of salt. I just usually assume 90% of people are incompetent. Like, when people don't shit their pants, I'm like, well, congratulations, you didn't do it. I just don't expect anything from them. So when they do something nice or when they do something smart, I'm actually like, wow, like that's actually cool. When you go at 50% and you fluctuate so much, it actually drains so much energy from you. And you miss what you actually like and what you actually enjoy. Last time you went clubbing, was it like cool where you're like, yeah, I'm having fun? Because most people, when they go to clubs, it's not because they have fun, they just want to look like they're having it. When I see people in clubs, not to shit on clubs because sometimes they're fun. I just see people that are overly stimulated. They're on Instagram all day, they're on drugs all day, they're taking like this much caffeine, and they just live on this fantasy land. And they're saying like, man, I'm so happy. Are you happy? Or are you overtly stimulated? Because there's a big difference. Happiness is when you don't want anything more. Overly stimulated is when you have what you want. super different things. Because when you don't want anything else, nothing's really an issue for you. Anything could happen, you would still be happy. When you're overly stimulated, if one thing doesn't go your way, you're pissed. They look the same to the naked eye, but they're opposite ends of the spectrum. And I feel like most people live stimulated just because they don't know that instead of chasing happiness, there's a way more sustainable, happier, better way to live, which is get happiness to come to you. So what do you actually like? This is why I could live anywhere in the world. I'm beyond that phase. I could live in New York, I could live in Miami, I could live whatever. I could live in Dubai if I wanted to. Yet I chose to live in Guatemala. That's a third world country. I live like 10 minutes away from cows, and I love it. Because I figured out what gives me dopamine and what gives me happiness is working, doing my thing and building. And I can do that the best in my country. Do you really like what you're doing? Or is it somebody else's programming in your head telling you that you should like this? A good way to do this is to figure out what did you do as a kid. Like think about what were you doing as a kid just for pleasure. For me, I wrote. That's what I did. Maybe you drew. Maybe you played. Maybe you climbed. You can ask your parents like, hey mom, hey dad, what did I do as a kid? And that thing you did as a kid hints at what you should be doing as an adult. Because as a kid, you were doing things just because you enjoyed it, because you liked it. And chances are, if you enjoy it, and you get dopamine from it, you can get world class at it because doing it is not a chore to you. Naval said something, do what feels like work to others, but feels like play to you. So what feels like play to you, you find out how to monetize, you win. But that's beyond the point. Manage your expectations correctly and everything will come to you. You won't even need to chase it.